Hi, and welcome to Tocqueville Talks. I'm your host, Brent Nelson, and I'm here with my co-host, Beth Larive. Well, we've had quite a week. We've had guests here at Furman for our final really big Tocqueville event of the year. It's gone pretty well, I think.
Yeah, I just got a chance to interview our three guests for this week, and I'm really excited, though, to hear about your interview with, was it 4 of the Tocqueville Fellows, 3 of the Tocqueville Fellows from last week?
Yeah, this is going to be one of those interesting interviews with 3 of the Tocqueville Fellows who were responsible for learning as much as they could about religion and foreign policy. They were responsible for Mark Amstutz and Peter Fever's visit here a couple of weeks ago. And we got to talk about, of course, foreign policy. But what's really interesting about this conversation is we talked about the state and about whether it is the best institution to protect human rights, peace, and security and prosperity. And I found it fascinating to talk to these students about how they see those issues. So I think we should go to the interview.
Sounds good.
I have the privilege of having 3 of our great students with us this morning, and it is an early morning. We're recording this on a Friday morning, which is really tough to get up as early as we've had to. But we're Friday morning, and it's the Friday the 13th. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
We'll try to keep it together.
Yeah. But yeah, we're recording that then. If anything that we say is out of date, you'll know why, because this will be broadcast in a couple of weeks. But anyway, I have 3 students here, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves. We've heard from a couple of them already on this podcast, but we have one new individual. So Nathan, tell us your name, where you're from, what your major is, what class you're in, the usual.
All right. Well, hey, Dr. Nelson, thank you so much for having me. It's fantastic to be here. As you said, my name is Nathan Johnson. I'm a politics and history major here at Furman. I'm a junior, and I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. So super happy to be here.
Michaela.
Good morning. My name is Michaela, and I'm a senior from Boone, North Carolina, and I'm studying politics and Spanish.
Great, and she's our first-time guest, and we're glad to have you. And Sim, you're a regular here too.
Oh, yeah, it's good to be back for a second time. My name's Sim. I'm a senior political science and history major from Jacksonville, Florida, and recently moved to Atlanta.
Yes, and you are also the recipient of good news. You've been accepted to Ohio State University, and you just accepted their offer, right?
Yep, I clicked the button last night, so we're a go.
Off to grad school. And a Big Ten guy. As a Wisconsin Badger myself, I will never cheer for your team, but I will support you through grad school.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Okay, well, we're here to talk about American foreign policy and religion in American foreign policy. Dr. Mark Amstutz, a professor from Wheaton College, was here, and he's been on the podcast before. But we want to talk about some of the things that he stressed when he was here. And I thought I would start with a passage from his newest book, Building World Order. And Dr. Amstutz is really focused on the nation state as the building block of international politics generally, but also individuals' callings in the world. So let me just read a short passage where he focuses his attention on the nation state. He says, fundamentally, nation states bear 2 types of responsibilities, those toward their own people and those toward other nations. The first responsibility concerns providing security, protecting human rights, and ensuring the economic welfare of people within its territorial boundaries. The second concerns the peace and prosperity of the world. The first task is domestic. The second is international. So Amstutz makes this big point that the nation state is the protector of human security, human rights, and prosperity. And that's really his bottom line. And I just want to ask you all, do you see the nation state as that important? Is it your guarantor of security, prosperity, and human rights?
Well, I guess I can start. I think we'll be able to get into some of the complications, like any form of world order, the order of nation states that's dominated in modern times is not perfect. And I think there's lots of things we can flesh out, be interested to hear what my peers think. But I would like to agree with Dr. Amstutz in many ways. I don't think we have seen an alternative to nation states emerge that offers the kind of prosperity and provisions for human rights, although imperfect still, that we have. And preserving that is our best shot right now until we have a viable alternative emerge. And perhaps we can get into some of those.
Yeah, I want to agree with Sim here and Amstutz. I think that, and this is a tentative thesis, I haven't thought through this too intensely, but at least in the current sort of political theater, I feel like we find groupings of people and actions be sort of as effective proportional to how much of an internal nation there appears to be to that state, in the sense of like a group cohesiveness and group understanding, because that's gonna make unified collective action sort of more streamlined. And if you have a lot of factions in a state that don't feel collective identity, I feel like that is more likely to slow down their like processes more generally. So I would agree with Amstutz, not because I think that it has to be the nation state forever, but because of like in our current political era, I think the nation state is most effective for action, and then because it's most effective for action, then it is most equipped to be able to sort of act in the defense of those things.
But you raise a good point. Some states do better than others. So there is a continuum. We're kind of thinking about ideal nation states as guarantors of order and security and prosperity and human rights, but not every state is a good state in that sense. So good point. Michaela?
Yeah, I would agree with both Nathan and Sim. I think, a good, strong nation state is ideal for world order. But I do think it can be difficult just to determine where like the domestic issues and the international issues are separated or when they come together. I'm thinking specifically in immigration, which Dr. Amstutz mentioned, and just how protecting domestic interests might come in conflict with that goal of wanting to support prosperity and peace in like the global order. And so that's just one of the thoughts I had. Yeah,
that's good, because one of the big questions is how universal are concepts like human rights. So let me make the argument that nation states can be horrible protectors of domestic order and human rights, and that's why we have a United Nations that wrote a UN charter on human rights and proclaimed that as a fundamental document for all nation states, and that it's really the world that has to take some responsibility for the upholding of human rights in every nation state. Now, does anybody agree with me or not?
Well, something maybe I would say is that I guess I'm not entirely convinced that like a desire to uphold rights or actions to uphold rights, at least in sort of the like top powerful countries, I don't think are necessarily rooted in actions of the UN. I don't feel very convinced that in like sort of a lot of the things that really matter and that are really sort of consequential, that tend to be dealings between sort of bigger nations like, the United States and China and Russia. They don't seem historically to sort of change their mind when the UN tells them that they're violating their sort of charter or their sort of human rights definitions. So I guess I see the UN as more of a setting for countries to come together and sort of express their viewpoints, but it doesn't sort of amplify the power of all the individual voices that could not have occurred just through like standard organizing and treaties and agreements and things like that. So I 100% agree that nations can be really bad at this, particularly because of what I was saying earlier, where like if you have a more streamlined decision-making process where you're not going to be sort of cut, or you're going to be like stuck, unable to sort of incentivize action or sort of move your nation's like pressure points, then I think you can have high variance in that sense. And I don't think that the UN has done necessarily a great job of culling any ways that's gone wrong in sort of bigger nations, but I do think that has more opportunity for working in like smaller nations where like larger countries can help support efforts that are sort of directed by the UN into these smaller nations.
I think in some ways the nation state may have spoiled kind of those efforts for kind of more world government and governance. I think human beings, when we're born, aren't born with kind of these inbuilt identities where we belong to these nations, but the socialization that comes with life is powerful, and that's built on strong history and strong traditions that bring people to see difference between their nation, and that's not something to be disregarded. And we're now working with several, coming into hundreds of years of building nations and building identities, with new ones emerging that have strong precedent in history and we did this what we call nationalism, right? And those differences aren't going away. And I think I do agree with Amstutz in some ways, where he goes with his thinking that it's naive to think that those differences will melt away and that is going to complicate these efforts for world government. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't dismiss us from needing to try to cooperate.
Yeah, I want to add on to that real quick, Sim, because I really like your point about like we're not sort of born with these identities, right? We're socialized into it. And so maybe I would make the claim then that if we had like a quote unquote real world government that functioned like very much like like a well-oiled state, I think that would be a nation state. I think it would have to be a nation state because there would be collective self-identifying of all the people. And maybe that can't happen until like humanity is dispersed across a couple different planets, right? So then it's like we can identify ourselves by what we're not. It's hard to do that now because we're stuck on one planet.
Yeah. How do we do that with 208 nation states?
Yeah.
Right. And more nations? Yeah.
I'm really struck by how different you all sound than maybe I sounded or my peers sounded back in the 1970s when I was in college. We were idealists, and we really wanted to see the world come together. I began studying the European Union, and I saw these many nation states coming together. It wasn't ever clear whether Europe was creating a new nation state called the United States of Europe or something brand new that the world had never seen before. But the idea was we weren't to be just citizens of one country. We were to be citizens of the world, and we were to cooperate with other people. And I guess you all aren't a representative sample, but I do think that students today are a little more jaded when it comes to international cooperation, less optimistic about that kind of thing, and more focused on, well, what can nation states do? And maybe we should maintain national sovereignty and strong borders because that's the best way to protect human beings. Do you agree with me? Or, I mean, I know you weren't alive in 1970, but do you agree that your generation is a little bit more focused, at least Americans are more focused on national sovereignty than cosmopolitanism in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if that weren't the case, we wouldn't have the current immigration discussions that we're having now. I think, like, immigration, as I can see it, has played an extremely large factor in at least the last 3 elections in the United States, and particularly in Europe, appears to me at least to be a large driver of a shift more to the right in European countries. People are being gathered around issues of immigration. So I would completely agree, and I think like the proof is very much in the pudding that people are coming out to vote and people are deciding who to vote, and that's being very much informed by how much they are differentiating their nation from other nations in how they conduct their like border policies.
Michaela, I'm kind of interested about your neck of the woods. You're up there in Western North Carolina in Boone, and you went to school with folks up there that are very different than, suburban Jacksonville or Atlanta. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, I would for sure echo Nathan in just thinking that, immigration definitely plays a part in just that idea of kind of ethnocentricity that's happening. I think, just people in Western North Carolina in general. I don't want to speak for all of them, but there is definitely this idea that, our culture is important, and I'm thinking.
Is there a sense of superiority, or just, North Carolina, the mountains anyway, has this reputation of being, crotchety individualist, get off my property, that kind of thing. I that's probably just a stereotype, but I want to hear what you have to say about those folks.
Yeah, it's still there for sure, but I think not quite as much as it was, which I think is a good thing in some ways. But yeah, so definitely there is a push for cosmopolitanism there more, but it'll be interesting to see how that changes.
Right. Okay, well, good. Let's move on to one of Amstutz's other major points was that Christians have a role to play in the peace and prosperity of the world. He identifies very strongly as a Christian academic, and so I want you to kind of try to think through it from his perspective in that sense. His focus is very much on individuals hearing a calling and giving their life to the world. He would often say, he was my professor way back in the day, and he would often say, identify your gifts and figure out a way to give them to the world. But it was very much an individual calling. It wasn't a national calling. But you heard his call to public service. Did that resonate with you? Do you think that is the way to bring justice to the world?
Yeah, I think there really is something to Dr. Amstutz's kind of call to individuals that it's hard to move an entire nation state to act with kind of the virtues and things like that we would like to see on a global scale, but individuals who are morally formed by their communities and shaped to be public servants in whatever form that takes, be it in serving in the military or public service or politics in a broader sense. All of these things, individuals, in Amstutz's thesis, who are shaped by the church and contributing to the government, that's a way as states are responsible with other states to shape cooperation, shape world order. That's better.
Do you see your role as someday a professor of political science as one of those ways in which you can give your gifts to the world?
Oh, absolutely. If I can make it through the academic job market one day. But that I do think that is a way, like you can think about this in a broad sense, what serving your country and then serving the world as a whole. That this kind of project of moral formation for individuals, and the same, I've really benefited from that at Furman, and getting to be with professors who are contributing to advancing my understanding of world politics and government and history. but also shaping me as an individual. And so professors play a really critical part in kind of that project in the same way other institutions are. So maybe you're not directly involved in government or public service, but you're helping contribute, like Dr. Amstutz, to individuals who will take part in that.
Yeah, I wanted to raise 2 points, particularly coming off of what Sim you just said. I think that first of all, I completely agree with Amstutz. I think that individuals totally have like a responsibility to find ways to cultivate their own strengths and then find ways to disperse that across the people that could benefit a lot from them. But I do think an important point, which like Sim was making, is that sometimes when people say that, there's a bit of a narrower perception of what it means to serve people. Whether that's and so sometimes that narrower perception could be limited to public service, nonprofit work, church work, teaching, things like this, and those are all very important things. But I notice a slight discounting of the opportunity for ways to serve your country as a CPA, as a person on Wall Street, as a IRS employee. These are all things that, particularly to the humanities type folk, are sort of seen with a lot of with an alien gaze. Like, I don't really understand that. It just seems like you're moving money around or making people pay their taxes, and that just seems kind of unappealing, or it seems kind of weird. But I think that those are really, really important things, because if we didn't have those things and we didn't have people that were good at them, then our economic system would crumble. And I think that is most people really, really care about how cheap their food is and how cheap they can buy houses for. And that's actually a really huge thing, as well as moral formation in these other types of roles. So I would potentially just expand that definition of types of jobs that could contribute to a loving, moral community. And then the second thing I would also raise is that the state doesn't exist ontologically. It's a social construct. So saying that the state does or doesn't have a certain calling or responsibility only makes sense insofar as you are just saying this, delineation of people within this group collectively should strive towards this general end, which ultimately sort of gets disseminated across the responsibility, or just dispersed responsibility. But so I don't think it's technically accurate, but I think in terms of a general terminology we can use that most people understand when we're saying it, I think that's fair to say that states have a responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Michaela?
Yeah, I definitely would echo Nathan. And just would add that for Dr. Amstutz, one of the important ways that citizens interact with the government is just being knowledgeable about the things that are going on. And so I think being in public service or serving in the military or overseas, that's just a really important way that we can stay knowledgeable and up to date about the problems that are happening, and that will help us to contribute to the decisions being made in our country about those things.
Yeah, just the this idea of serving in the military or serving in the IRS, in some ways those are jobs that contribute to an orderly society. And order brings about peace, and peace allows humans to flourish. So those are godly callings, and I think that those are really good points to make. Final question, and I want to push you all a little bit on this. We were talking before we started recording about how Amstutz did not come across as a Christian nationalist. His emphasis on Christian service to the world through individual callings was his main emphasis. It was not on a government making a commitment to enact God's law in the world or God's mission in the world, and to apply it to America, that somehow America is uniquely called to exercise God's will in the world. So he's not a Christian nationalist. But to what extent is a country like the United States, which is informed by its Christian heritage, values that were established in everything from families to social organizations to the churches themselves. Does that give the country any sense of a moral mission that would not go as far as Christian nationalism, but would be a force for good in the world? I guess I'm trying to get at, does a moral call or a moral sense have a role to play in international relations? Or are we just billiard balls hitting one another, seeking power and working for the security of my own nation state and not for the rest of the world? What do you think?
I think I'll return. Yeah, I think once again I'm going to agree with Dr. Amstutz. This idea of the individual as moral agents, I think that's a really kind of powerful concept, and that's important in international relations because individuals are shaping the institutions that are either striving for pure realist security interests or more, cooperative, global kind of interest, and those are so moral agents that are shaped by the institutions like we have in the United States can pursue moral ends at the same time while serving a nation state that I think ultimately is not in itself going to have altogether moral ends. And I think drawing that line is important, and there is a line that can be crossed when you begin to see this kind of overlap between moral mission and the interest of your state. And we've seen where that's become dangerous at points in history, and when that line gets crossed and when it becomes easier to cross, albeit an extreme example, but Germany in the 1930s and 20s, when we saw the breakdown between church and the kind of theological justification of nationalism and desire for expansion that led to rather extreme justification of crimes that would come in the decades to come. And so the dangers are pretty severe there, and we don't know kind of where generations to come from us will take these ideas of moral mission. So keeping that line firm with the individuals shaping institutions from within, but not the nation as a whole kind of being imbued with this, moral mission.
Yeah, I like your point about sort of like where we draw the line, obviously, because there is like some sort of equilibrium where everyone has like their minimum acceptable morality in government that they want to institute. Where like, some people may say like, okay, I don't want to have like a Christian nation where we're unifying church and state, but I also don't want to have a nation where we are completely ignoring like a certain human rights violation overseas, even though both are like morally informed questions. And so I think that everyone has their own sort of internal model of like the minimum amount of morality that their country can have. And so, yeah, I just think that's like a thing to note, that like everyone that is trying to institute it thinks that they're already at the minimum. I don't know, that's like an undeveloped thought. So feel free to push back on that.
Michaela?
Yeah, one of the thoughts that I just had after hearing those statements is just that how morality in the U.S. I think looks a lot different from maybe the morality or the justice system that we would see in, I don't know, China or Iran or other places. And so I think idealistically, the state being this institute of justice, I would love to see that, but I think it gets messy just with different degrees of morality, and in some ways I think that can be a good place where we see like the benefit of international institutions just kind of coming together and the role of the individual in deciding those things. But that's just an idea.
So I guess I'm going to be the odd man out on this one, because I really do believe that nation states need a moral core. I think it has been over the years, since the the post-war period, that the United States has taken the lead in disaster relief, poverty alleviation, medical attention, that has taken resources from the United States and given them to other peoples in other places. Now, is there hypocrisy in that? Absolutely, yes. We do it for our own interest, but we also do it for driven by a kind of sense of responsibility that those who are wealthy should do things for those who are not so wealthy. I just think that's been part of the United States, and I do think that in the current administration, there is more sense that we are just billiard balls and we have our interests and we are going to drive those. I guess I long for those days when there was at least some moral justification for going to war. Right now, I don't see those things, and yeah.
Do you mind if I ask a follow-up question
Sure.
to that for you personally? Would you prefer, would you rather have no moral justification for an act done with no moral backing, or would you rather have a moral justification for an action with no moral backing? Hypothetically speaking.
If I understand your question correctly, I think the kind of hypocrisy that you're referring to is really a kind of honoring of the moral principle. We don't live up to our ideals, but I'd like the ideals articulated. And we can be criticized for not living up to them, but I would like a moral justification even for a self-interested act, because it alerts people to the idea that some actions are morally justified and some are not. Did that answer your question, Nathan?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I see what you're saying.
Well, and I think this gets back to, I can pull back on my hardline stance in some ways there that, in some ways this complements, like, this takes individuals who are committed to those moral kind of activities abroad, serving in government service, serving in public service to make those things happen and to articulate our interests with their also moral gains for people around the world. And that's a good thing.
So I think in an increasingly secularized society, you do get, you do lose that kind of moral necessity to have a moral argument, have a moral justification for actions. It's kind of a nihilism, right? That you just can do stuff because you have political power. Now, that's always been the case, but at least people used to say, well, I'm doing this because I think this is a good thing.
Maybe I can jump in here. I guess part of my, I'm not necessarily convinced that it would be better if we proposed moral justifications for all of our actions, because when I look back through history, there are so many things that have moral justifications for them and it doesn't seem like we were more moral back then in the slate of behaviors we were engaging in domestically and internationally when we were having moral justification in the sense of certain imperialist tendencies or colonialization and things like that. So I think maybe idealistically I support what you're saying, but I'm not sure that based on sort of the trend that I think of looking back, I don't know if we tried to continue that heritage and legacy of moral justification. I don't know that would necessarily make things better. I'm not saying it would make things worse, but I'm just saying I wonder if moral justification is potentially orthogonal to practical implications of different decisions.
Okay. I mean, I concede moral justifications for slavery, moral justifications for human rights violations of Native Americans, were very hypocritical. But for some reason, I think the alternative to say that we're just doing this because we want to and we can do it, I think it's somehow dehumanizing to me. It And I don't have a well-articulated or well-thought-through position on this, but I think we're going to have to leave it there. Michaela, do you have one last thought for us before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I think just Dr. Amstutz's talk was really helpful just to get us to think about what does it mean to interact well with society, because we do have a responsibility to the people in our nations and to those around the world. And so it was just a good reminder for me to think about what am I doing or what can I do to just help those around me. And that was a good perspective, I think.
Well, great. Well, I thank all of you for being here early on a Friday morning and for helping us think through these things. I think we've raised more questions than we've answered, but I think that's a good place to end. It gets us all to think. So, thank you and goodbye. Thanks for listening to Tocqueville Talks. This episode was produced by Audrey Enghauser. Lucy Southwell provided administrative support. The theme music is called The Girl I Left Behind Me, a popular folk song in early 19th century America, here performed by Jacob Taylor Armerding. To learn more about our lecture series and events, our Tocqueville and Beaumont Fellows programs for undergraduates, and to listen to episodes, watch event recordings, or support our work, search on Google for the Tocqueville Center at Furman University. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, subscribe, comment, and share Tocqueville Talks on all your favorite listening services. And visit our YouTube channel for full recordings of past events and episodes. Until next time, goodbye.